Good afternoon. I'm Will Glover. I'm the director of the Center for South Asian Studies. Thanks for coming. This is one of my favorite events of the year. I haven't had the chance to meet the fellows personally because I just started in my new role, but I look forward to hearing about your experiences in India. As many of you will know, this is a program that began in 2006, the Summer in South Asia Fellowship, and it was brought to the University of Michigan by a very special person who you'll get a chance to hear from in just a moment. We have sent now 101 students to India on this program. You're the group of 10 that put us over 100. And I think the results of that program, of this project, in the last 12 years have been nothing short of extraordinary. You will hear, those of you in the audience today will hear some pretty amazing stories about a kind of awakening, a kind of development of self-confidence, I think, is something that's very common, commonly experienced by our fellows. And it took a lot of hard work on behalf of the fellows to get the fellowships, to be rewarded the fellowships. It took a lot of hard work on behalf of our staff to help the fellows secure good projects and present good applications and stay in touch with our students, orient them to the project. And even as recently as about 3 o'clock this afternoon, two people in particular, two of our staff members in particular, I want to single out for their extraordinary service. Janelle Fossler, first of all, I read the post-fellowship surveys of all the students who've gone on this program, and without fail, Janelle is probably the single most cited, wonderful thing about this program. So, Janelle, you're very special, you're very talented, you're very skilled, and we're going to miss not having you work with us anymore on this program. This was Janelle's last year, so you guys benefited from that. Ariana has been a partner in crime with Janelle throughout, and I want to thank you also for your continued interest and commitment to this program. Morgan, who's not here, I don't think, but we should also mention her name. You didn't come here to listen to me, but I do want you to take take a few minutes to meet Dave. Dave is the person who made this opportunity possible for all 101 of you, and he wants to say a couple of words right here at the outset. So, Dave.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Janelle. And Farina, wherever you are, it's great to be back on campus. This is sort of the highlight of my entire year. And, I'm looking forward to hearing the presentations today. And I'm anticipating after everyone has spoken, and we have sort of the reception that I get to chat with you and learn a little bit more about your experiences. And, of course, if you come back to campus, and especially if it is the homecoming weekend, you anticipate going to the big house and also cheering the team on to victory. Well, this year it's sort of special because my son-in-law went to the University of Maryland, the University of Maryland Terrapins. And so I'm planning on, if appropriate, which I hope it will be, calling him up after every touchdown of the real U of M, and reminding him that when Terrapins and Wolverines battle, guess who wins? And so I'm sure he will appreciate that. Many of you, I'm sure, have wondered, why did I want to establish the endowment for the summer in South Asia? And, one of the, I'd say, major reasons was the University of Michigan has been very good to me and my family. I got 2 degrees here. My grandfather was a professor in education here. My brother, my dad, uncles, and various other assorted family members went here. My wife's father was the editor of the Michigan Daily. Her brother went here. So there's a long, and my son went here. So there's a long history of connection. And, when I retired, I thought, well, I've reached the point where I can think about giving back. And giving back to the university, I thought was, a good thing to do. But I didn't know what to do. Where could I make the most impact? Well, the year and a half before I retired, which is 20 years ago, I had gone to India on business trips a number of times during that period of time. And I found India to be a land of contrasts, as I'm sure those of you have gone there. Tremendous wealth, tremendous poverty. Culture, thousands of years old versus Bollywood. Cosmopolitan cities and still small rural villages. Unbelievable natural beauty, urban sprawl, pollution, all the things that are unattractive. And I think, the latest IT versus bullock carts, there's these contrasts. Also, I found India to be fascinating, frustrating, exciting, mystifying, enjoyable, and at times gave me the feeling I want to be anywhere else. But above all, I found India to be mind-expanding, and in a sense, I was hooked. And I can remember on my first trip to India, and prior to that, my sum total of international experience was going to the exotic locale of Windsor, Ontario, on the other side of the Detroit River, which didn't really prepare me for India. And I remember when I stepped out of the airport terminal in Delhi, and you see the chaos, the smells, people, and all this. It sort of reminded me of Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz, whereas Dorothy, she arrives in Oz and says to her little dog, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. And that was certainly my feeling. But anyway, when the opportunity presented itself for what has become the Summer in South Asia, I thought, gee, this is terrific. It's just what I want to do for a couple reasons. One, I think, is to give undergraduate students an opportunity for experiences that they would not have gotten anywhere else. And I thought also that the fellows would build relationships with people in India they interacted with, which would be important in some small way as to providing connection between the United States and the world's largest democracy. And, after or before and after and during funding the program, I had real qualms. Would students, undergraduate students, want to go to India? Would they work there be of benefit to them as well as to the organizations they're working with? Would the faculty and staff at the Center of South Asian Studies provide the ongoing support to make the program beneficial? Would the program be sustainable, both from the point of view of financially, but also the support and the interest of the students. Would the fellows have a chance to experience the real India as compared to going to India as a regular tourist? Would the program be such that it would potentially change people's lives or perhaps reaffirm what they want to do in their future careers? And, all these things were of concern to me. In a perspective of 12 years later, I didn't need to worry. All these things that I was worried about have not come to pass. And so I'm very pleased with how the program has gone on, and I'm anticipating, a continuation of it in the future. And I'd like to thank the faculty, the staff, and especially you students who were willing to step out of your comfort zone and go halfway around the world and spend time and effort productively in a culture and country so vastly different from our own. So thanks to all of those involved, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your presentations.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Summer in South Asia Fellowship. My name is Janelle Fossler, and I'm the former Summer in South Asia Fellowship Advisor, or CISA, as we would refer to it affectionately in this vast landscape of acronyms. This is the fourth cohort of CISA Fellows that I've had the privilege to work with, and this fellowship has with certainty been the most meaningful and rewarding thing I've done professionally. And it's also been really meaningful to me on a more personal level. It's always great to get paid for something that you feel like you would do in your spare time as a hobby. So as you've heard, the Summer in South Asia Fellowship provides funding and funding for students to do research and internships in India over the summer months. My background is in international education, and I can tell you that this program is just incredibly unique. Students, the 10 students here and the 90 before them, they essentially design their own study abroad program. And it's based on their own academic and personal interest, and with some support from the Center for South Asian Studies. The application process, as any of them would tell you, is a learning experience in itself. Students have to seek ways that they can apply their interests to the work that they're going to do in a context of India. They have to not only find an organization that's aligned with those interests, but they also have to secure their own internship. Beyond that, they design their own research proposal, and they plan for their whole time in India. The fellows then travel to India independently, so not in a group as you would see with most study abroad programs, but on their own. And they have the opportunity to immerse themselves in just the very rich culture of India. Which brings us to tonight, which is the capstone of the fellowship for the 2018 fellows. We're here to celebrate them and get a small glimpse into some of their experiences. I'm so proud of these 10 students, but not at all surprised by how much they took away from this experience, because I was able to witness how much they put into it throughout almost the whole academic year last year. I admire all of you for your spirit and your intrepidness and just your tenacity and your absolute dedication to everything that you did in putting this together. So we should give them a quick hand before we even start. And on that note, I would also like to thank you, Dave. Without your generosity and vision for this program, we wouldn't be here tonight. Dave has made this experience possible not just for these 10 fellows you'll hear from tonight, but like we said, over 100 students in the past 12 years. I don't think it's possible to articulate just the profound impact this fellowship has had on all of these students, but I know that everyone who has been touched by this program is just immensely grateful to you. I have to thank Ariana and Morgan. Morgan was not able to come tonight, but they were just instrumental to the success of this program. Ariana, who is here, worked for 2 years, but was also a 2015 Summer in South Asia Fellow. So the only thing that I ever had to say to Ariana, or the only frustration I ever had with her, was telling her to get off of GChat at like 11 o'clock at night when she was like communicating with fellows or providing advice or different things. So her dedication has just been like, I just can't even put it into words. Like, she has just been here for the past 2 years, even now when she's not working, like she's already doing all the outreach for CISA. So she's just been like a big part of this. And then also to Morgan, who was also a 2015 fellow and also worked tirelessly all year on the fellowship. So I really feel like they carried most of the work this year. So I'm super grateful to them. And then I'd also like to thank Farina Mir, who's the former director of the center. She works tirelessly and passionately on everything she does, including this fellowship. And I know that Will, the current director, is also just very deeply invested in this program and was around and here when it began. And I guess the last person is Clemente, who will be stepping into this role, and I just feel so good about that because I know it will be left in like really great hands. So without further ado, we can get started. Gretchen Andrews is our first speaker, and she did her internship with Paradevi Films.
Hi, all. I'm Gretchen. I was in Mumbai for 3 months this summer. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am a 5th year. I study film and psychology, and my main interest is documentary film, but I have no idea what I want to do, and that's definitely why CISA seemed like such a great fit, just to kind of like combine all my hobbies, which I was able to do a bit with this internship for sure. It incorporated filmmaking, journaling, the website, I'll get into that. Journaling, poetry, music, and acting. These are just kind of the things that I really love to do and study as well. And then love, sex, and relationship connoisseur. Oh my gosh, that was the big thing about this internship was I'm so not that. I've never been in a relationship. This will make sense when I show you the next slide and show you what the work was all about. But yeah, for about a month after I secured the internship, I was like questioning whether or not I was gonna like be able to help them. But I'll talk about that more. So I worked for this website called Agents of Ishq. Yeah. Oh, cool. Thank you. I worked for this website called Agents of Ishq. Ishq means love. And it was started by a documentary feminist filmmaker named Paramita Vohra. She's done some symposiums here, so that's how I was able to get connected to her. And she runs Paradevi Pictures, a documentary film company. So anyway, this project is specifically on making conversations about love, sex, and relationships, gender identity, body positivity, all those things comfortable. And she does this by using this website in a very like comedic, sassy, just fun tone. I would spend hours through the website just really enjoying the articles, and I learned so much myself. And the website focuses on podcasts, articles, videos, quizzes. 3 out of 4 of those, which I was able to help produce things for. Some of the other projects I was able to do help on were, one, a music video, which was a huge deal when I was there, and it took about a month of our time, and it was all about the idea that romance starts with consent, and it goes through these 3 different couples and how they experience kind of their interpretation of that. It's really great. It's on YouTube. It's called, I believe, Love in the Garden of Consent. If you want the details, I can help you out later. And the other thing was I helped a lot with the social media presence. So one of the campaigns I came up with was #NakedFeelings, which I asked our Twitter followers if they could describe how they feel when they're naked in 3 words, and then I took all the answers and compiled an animated video out of it. So some of the research, this is our office. It's actually Paramita grew up sharing this 1-bedroom apartment with her mom. So it was really cool, it was a really homey feel to it. I loved all my coworkers, and I was basically focusing on conceptions of virginity in India and all around the world too, for sure. And I kind of did that by diving into the linguistic history of the word virgin and what that means in India, all that stuff. And kind of Paramita showed me how different customs around the world have given it the connotation of having good character if you're a virgin and having bad character if you're a virgin. And the history, all those things that I found that associated virginity with being good was actually a bad thing in a lot of ways, because it revved it up so that if you're not a virgin, you're a bad person, which isn't true. And then I focused more on what that idea means to millennials, and I was able to go out on the streets near college campuses and ask people some questions that probably aren't really asked a lot. I mean, not even on the streets anywhere. And one of them was, like, what does it mean to lose your virginity, if anything? Is it physical? Is it mental? Anything? And a very nice man, and he looked like he came out of a GQ magazine, gave us the answer. If anything, we're gaining something. We're gaining our innocence. And yeah, that experience was really endearing, to be able to see how comfortable people were to talk about it, and they really enjoyed sharing that. Okay, yes, the time and space for never-ending questions. This is me in the Himalayas. It was the best day of my time in India. I wish I could explain the story, but it's so long. But yeah, I think if anything, try and try again. The people that I worked with really pushed us immensely, and one of my bosses, Umang, taught me that technology is not smarter than us. Like, don't give up, stop asking questions, just try to figure it out yourself, and then come to me if that's the last resort. The creative industry is draining. Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. I think that speaks for itself. And also, sex is a good thing. It's not just this one event that happens. It can be something that happens over your whole lifetime, and it's a self-exploration. So this is a quote I wanted to leave with by Paramita. She said this at our going away dinner, and it kind of just mesmerized me. But she said, "The life you dream of, the life you want, that's the only life there is to live. There's no other way." And I just kind of was dumbfounded staring at her, because I'm sitting across the table from this woman who's traveled to the US 20 times and all around the world. She's lived in all these different places. She's made music videos. She's acted in sitcoms and created documentary films, and is a huge activist in Mumbai for feminism. So just to see, and she said, "I'm 50 years old and I'm still effing up." So you just have to do it, accept that that's how it's gonna be. And I think for people that wanna go into the creative field, that's something that's really important to hear, and that you can make it happen. And then lastly, really I can't even begin to explain how grateful I am for this experience. But thank you, Dave, so much for everything. And it's definitely hard to process everything that happened, but even though I can't say in one comprehensive sentence, this is what I learned from India, this is what I got from it, I just know that I got so much out of it, and I can't wait to see in the future how I begin to understand that better. And I couldn't even keep up with my journal, my everyday journal. There was just so much I was learning every day, and I'm just blown away. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. Our next fellow that will be speaking is Kirti Babu, and she was an intern at PSG Hospital.
everyone. I'm Krithi, and I worked so I'm a senior, and I'm pre-med, so I'm studying neuroscience and gender and health. So in my classes, we talk a lot about the US healthcare system, and what really drew me to CSAW is that I wanted to go see how a different country thought about healthcare, how like their cultural norms influenced how they practiced healthcare. So I was in Coimbatore, India, so I was in the city for 1 week and in a rural village called Vedampati for 4 weeks. So if you've ever heard of Isha Yoga or Uti, that's exactly where I was. And these are just some of the pictures from like the weekend trips I took, or even just like while we were going on home visits, this is what I got to see. So on the right is the main PSG, big research, like University of Michigan type hospital. And on the left is like the one hallway clinic that I worked at for my majority of the time I was there. And so PSG is a private hospital. So if you know about the Indian healthcare system, they have a public sector, so they have government hospitals that are completely free of cost, and then private hospitals that have a large range. So there's ones that are really cheap, and then ones that are incredibly expensive, and your quality of care depends on how much money you're willing to pay. And so what's unique about PSG is that they're a private hospital which has a privately funded free clinic in the rural areas. So first, when I was what I did was I worked on a number of research projects about health education, and I helped take vitals, take patient histories, things of that sort. And this is on the left from the rural clinic, and on the right from one of the home visits I was on. Okay, so this is the main PSG hospital. And here, as you can see on the left side, there are so many people in the waiting rooms. Like, there was no room for me to stand. If you go in to see the doctor, there are 3 people, there are 3 doctors and 3 patients all in the same room, like smaller than a Michigan hospital room. And that's here, patient confidentiality, we're not even allowed to talk about it in the elevators, even as a volunteer in the hospital. So being able to I remember once I was sitting there and the doctor was explaining to someone that they had a tumor that they had to get checked out, and they were crying, and there was literally 2 families across from them witnessing the entire experience with them, which was really impactful to me to see how resources can really impact someone's how they receive healthcare. So after that experience, I went to their rural health training center where I got a lot more hands-on experience. And as you can see, the rural health training center is a lot less crowded. There's a lot less people that seek out primary care in India. There's a lot less people that think it's worth seeking out. So on the left, they have a blackboard with all their demographics. In the middle is their mission statement, which to summarize is to offer quality healthcare to everyone regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic status, and a really big thing they practice is health education, because it's not something that's, especially in rural communities when you're not educated, it's not something that you know about. And on the right, I just thought this was interesting. If someone ever came in with from an ambulance, this is the door they would bring them through, this tiny little hole, and put them on the bed. So what I found while I was at this health training center is I was wondering why they had this center if there was already a free health clinic by the government. And I found that there were a lot of differences. For one, the center had to have a female doctor, which is culturally really important in India, and they didn't have it at the government-funded center. They also had specialty doctors come in once a week, so if you had to see the OBGYN, you could go here. And they also had a lot of health education classes, and they had yoga classes and a physical therapist, a nutritionist, so a lot of things that you just wouldn't even think about needing. And this is the government-sponsored PHC. I didn't get to work here, but I visited a couple times. And as you can see, it's a lot bigger because they serve a larger demographic. It's a little bit more run down. On the left is their lab. This is how they test to see what your blood sugar is and stuff. They just put it on a little glass slide, which is a lot less, they didn't have any of the machines the PSG center did. And then on the right, they have a lot more space, so they have bigger ambulances come in and things like that. And I found that here, wait times are really long. But this one had a little bit lower wait times because they had the supplement center in Vedampati for them. But the wait times were really long. I remember even when they were showing me around, someone was like, are you taking her blood? Like, I've been waiting for so long. Like, they got really upset. That was really eye-opening to see. And I found a good example of how PSG really looks at what the community needs and acts based on that, is that the Government Health Center has the resources for labor delivery, but PSG doesn't, because they decided that there's just not enough need for 2 places to have that, those facilities. So my impact was that I got to really learn and see how a different healthcare system works, and how just because there were so many things that they did differently in India that I just thought, how is this allowed? But I found that they did what worked for them, and just because it's different doesn't mean it's worse. And I got to have a lot of conversations that showed me that engaging with cultural beliefs and really learning about those cultural beliefs and cultural norms can help deliver healthcare in a better way. And it's important for me to take what I learned and use it in my future as a physician also. And I also got to speak with a lot of high-ranking doctors and public health officials that taught me a lot about healthcare that I did not know about earlier.
So our next speaker is Alexandra Card. Alexandra interned at I'm going to say this wrong probably, Karmachari Andalan. All right.
Hi, so my name is Alexandra Card. I'm a junior studying history and political science, although ultimately my goal is to plan to attend law school, and my main interest is in human rights law and civil rights law. So this summer I was working at an organization called Safai Karmachari Andalan, which is an NGO that works to end manual scavenging. So for some context, manual scavenging is a occupation that is given to people who are at the bottom of the caste system in India, and basically they are responsible for cleaning up human waste. It's a very unsanitary job, but given to people who are viewed as the bottom of society. And it's kind of used as a way to discriminate against people because they are doing this unclean occupation. So it's a caste-based occupation, and it's also very much part of the patriarchy because it disproportionately affects women and, yeah. So SKA sort of has a national impact on the movement against manual scavenging. So they do a lot of government advocacy. They hold a lot of protests. They have a countrywide mobilization of the manual scavenging community. And they also have a rehabilitation program in order to rehabilitate women who have been part of the manual scavenging occupation. So while I was at SKA, my main 2 tasks were data collection. So I documented and collected information about deaths that had occurred because of manual scavenging. And what SKA did with this information is they would take it and present it to the government just to show people that this was an issue that was still occurring, because that is something that the government doesn't really want to admit to because they think that it's not a practice that still occurs. My other big project was to work with the rehabilitation program that SKA did. So for the rehabilitation program, SKA would basically provide women with an alternative way of making money. So this involved teaching them skills such as how to make clothes, how to drive a rickshaw. They even bought a family a cow so that way they could get money by selling the milk. But the goal basically was to provide a more dignified means of making money, because once someone was able to support themselves, they could pull themselves out of the manual scavenging position. And because I did so much with the rehabilitation program, I decided to focus my research question about that and sort of look at what SK was doing and seeing what made the rehabilitation program effective, and also what were some of the challenges that they ran into in implementing this rehabilitation program. So I think the biggest thing that I found from my research project was the fact that SKA did have a really positive and important impact on people's lives through the rehabilitation efforts. So, I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but it was quite intense to see how much someone's life would change over the short span of maybe 2 or 3 months, just because they all of a sudden didn't have to go and do manual scavenging work every day. One thing that I kind of noticed from observing these women and listening to them tell their stories was the notion of self-confidence. And I think looking at discrimination, that sort of thing, it's very easy to see the structural things that work against people and hold them back, but there really isn't as much emphasis on the psychological side of that. So talking to a lot of these women, they would talk about how they didn't think they had the capabilities to do anything except for the work that they had been told that they had to do for their entire lives. So I think for me, that was an important takeaway, just moving forward as I do other work related to civil rights law. So kind of transitioning into that, this experience really helps me focus in on what I want to do in my future endeavors, particularly with the civil rights aspect of law and what the law can do to empower people. So in particular, I was able to work with the leader of the movement against manual scavenging, Beswada Wilson, who was like a very inspiring figure to me because he actually was born into manual scavenging but was able to work his way out through education and just by working really hard. And he was very generous with his time with me. He would come in every day and make sure that I was comfortable and I was feeling okay. And he also made sure that I was doing work that I thought was valuable, which I think sometimes in internships, people just give you all the tasks that you don't really, they don't want to do themselves. But Mr. Wilson was very sure to make sure that I was doing something that was valuable to me and something that I wanted to be doing. And personally, I think this experience was valuable because it gave me a lot of new confidence in my ability to go to a new place and establish relationships and start out with new people, which is something that I didn't think I would be able to do before. This was actually my first international travel experience, so it was definitely quite a culture shock. And yeah, but it was very valuable in just kind of learning about what skills you need in order to go to a new country and find new friends and that sort of thing. So I just want to send a thank you to Janelle and Ariana just for helping me get to where I was and finding me this internship. I would not have applied if Janelle hadn't mentioned to me, being I think this would be a great opportunity for you, so thank you so much. And I also want to thank the donor because I would never have been able to make this experience happen without your support, so thank you so much.
All right, so next we'll hear from Ara Gayar, and she is going to talk about her internship with Sunlab.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Ara Gayar, and this past summer, I was able to do an internship with Sunlab. And so a bit of background, I'm a junior in the Ford School of Public Policy, and my focus area is in international relations and human rights in post-colonial countries. And I plan to either go into law or international relations. So the organization that I was working with is Sunlab, which is a non-governmental organization located in Calcutta, and their work is primarily to prevent trafficking of women and children. And specifically, it's surrounded around sex trafficking, except they also work to combat all forms of trafficking. And so as an intern there, I was able to work on the organization's annual report. And so the first half of my time there, I was at the Sneha shelter home, which is up on the left. And so I was able to sit down and observe and report for their annual report. And I got to see the different workshops that they did and the different developmental services that they provided. The other half of my trip, I was working at one of the child drop-in centers. And so basically these are centers within the red light district, and children growing up within red light districts are more vulnerable to trafficking. And so these drop-in centers seek to end that cycle and provide them with different services such as educational tutoring and the likes. And so the framework of my research, my question was how strongly are India's penal laws against human trafficking enforced in Calcutta in accordance to 2014 UN principles on the right to an effective remedy to victims of human trafficking. And so that framework came from the UN principles that are shown right here. And I specifically delved into India's due diligence in providing that preventative, investigative, prosecutive, and rehabilitative services to victims. And so the Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act was basically the legal doctrine that I used as a basis for these penal laws, because it is the largest on a national scale legal doctrine that it combats human trafficking in India. And so basically we delved into these 4 different subject areas, and we found basically different shortcomings that this doctrine provided. Some of these being, for example, though ITPA calls for a task force, there isn't special training that's given to them. In addition, for punitive measures, the sentence is 3 to 7 years, which is much below the international average, as well as some laws actually serve to, well, the way that they're interpreted, it ends up penalizing families of sex workers, and rather than the people that are putting them into these scenarios. And so the way that Sunlab seeks to mend these shortcomings is through different services and programming. And so you can see under these 4 different basically umbrellas, the different services that they provide to mend these. Some of them being, for example, police legal aid. And so the legal team within Sunlab actually sends people over to, the police forces, and, they'll have a case and they'll tell them exactly what laws they can apply to this. In addition, the remedy processes that Sunlab provides are impeccable. They actually come up with these rehabilitative and repatriative toolkits that they send all around the country so that they can be implemented in different districts. And so Sunlab really works with the government to look at what is still needed, and they try to mend that. And just like I was saying, they have a very unique relationship. And so this quote is actually from the Shruti, who was the person I was interning for, and she kind of summed it up all in this one quote, where NGOs believe that they can't do much without governmental assistance because of budgeting and resource access. And in addition, governments believe they can't do a lot without NGOs because of their specified expertise in this and their manpower. And so it creates a very interesting relationship where they almost depend on each other, but the basis of that relationship is because the government or the state itself doesn't meet the basis and the basis that was outlined in the UN doctrine before. And so the impact that I had, it came in a bunch of different ways. So personally, I was able to have a lot of different relationships with people, and really just build on those relationships, all from like personal with the people that I was staying with to professional. And I was really happy with the project that I was given because it was a lot of responsibility that I was able to take on, and I was given a lot of independence in working with it. I mean, with each of the sites that I worked at, they would take me the first day, and then after that they were like, okay, you come on your own. And so it was a lot of navigating transportation in India, especially when I was going to the red light districts. It was almost, I always got funny looks from Ubers when I'd ask them to drop me off there. But, I mean, it really was amazing, especially with the child drop-in centers. I was able to see a complete rearrangement of like the idea of a nuclear family, and it was almost beautiful in a sense because they provided a place where these children could all live together, and it almost was an expanded family. And the services that they really provided, I mean, it spanned from educational tutoring to dance workshops, and so it was great to be a part of that. In terms of the professional and academic impact, to be able to design my own research and implement it on an international level is definitely an unparalleled opportunity, and I don't think I would have been given that with any other program here at Michigan. And so for that, I would just like to thank the CISA Fellowship and the donor for making this possible. So thank you.
So next we'll hear from Erin Haley, who interned with ATMA.
Hi,
Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. So great to see people. So just kind of basically what I'll be going over is a little bit of an introduction to me, some of the tasks and challenges I had with India as a whole, and then also specifically with the work that I was doing while I was there, some of my research findings, and then my learnings and takeaways from the experience as a whole. So just to kind of get a background about me, I was born and raised in Medfield, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston, and I've always really had an interest in traveling. My family loves to travel, and I think the first time I ever went to a country that was very different from the US was when I went to Turkey with my family, and I was absolutely in love with the feeling of culture shock that there were so many people that didn't look like me, that didn't speak the same language as me, and it was very cool to be able to get an entirely different experience out of that. So that was kind of what started my craving for traveling to countries that are totally different than the US. I'm obviously a student here at Michigan, and I'm studying business and data science. So I have an interest in consulting, but my background is a little bit more in marketing. So that's what I was doing a lot of this summer, but found that that's not exactly where I want to pursue my future career, and I want to be a little bit more focused on the data analytics side. There we go. Okay, so basically what I was doing for my work is I was working with a company called Atma for about 2.5 months. They're an NGO that offers consulting services to other NGOs that are working in the education space. So what they found is essentially that there are a lot of people that have these great ideas for education, and so they decide to start an NGO, but they really don't have any idea how a business works or how an NGO works, so they find themselves falling short of things like fundraising, as well as how to actually like run an HR department, or all those different types of things that are really essential for making sure that your NGO runs properly. So we kind of stepped in to help them find out how those business aspects can work, and so that they can make the biggest impact possible through like the education side of it. I was working on a lot of website design and content management. I had 2 projects while I was there that were essentially helping them grow their fundraising base by being able to actually have a website where people could donate online, which was very different because a lot of people will just kind of start an NGO and rely on family or friends to get funding. But if you want to grow, you're going to have to expand who's donating to you. So that was one of the things we really focused on, is making sure that they have that fundraising going forward. I also helped with social media strategy and branding overall. So a lot of companies would have all these different logos, all these different kind of looks and ideas about their business that weren't consistent across all of their branding. So a lot of potential donors would look at one pamphlet and then go on their website and find totally different information, which is never good because they don't really know what the cause is that they're donating to. So working on kind of bringing that branding together so that everyone has an idea of what the company is doing. And then the last thing was a one-pager development for a few different organizations. I was working on a one-pager, which is essentially just like one brief document that explains everything about the organization, like what are your numbers, what do you actually do, all that kind of stuff, what's your impact. So a lot of the challenges that I faced had to do with cultural differences that I hadn't quite expected. So for example, I guess, well, this is also partially because of the way the NGOs work, that they're usually stretched very thin because they don't have the money to hire a lot of people. So a lot of times you would ask for something by a certain deadline and they'd agree to it and then just not even come close to being within the deadline because they had so much work to do that they didn't anticipate because they just don't have enough people on staff. So I think at first it was really frustrating because that meant that I couldn't do my work. So there was a lot of sitting around the office at the beginning, and that was really frustrating because I came there to do what I really had wanted to do and also like learn about that experience. But I think eventually I realized that it was just because they were busy. It wasn't because they weren't respecting you and what your work was. So there are also a lot of language barriers. One of the organizations I worked with spoke very little English, and so, for example, I was leading a workshop with them about branding guidelines, and I would be speaking in English, and they all spoke English fluently, but just were much more comfortable with their Marathi, so they would actually like ask questions to my coworker who wasn't leading the session about like what I was saying, and so it was really difficult to try and be leading a session and then not be able to like communicate effectively with your audience. And so over time, I think it just took the different partners that we were working with to become comfortable talking to me and knowing that I'm not going to judge them because they say a word wrong in English here and there. And so then they became more comfortable just asking me straightforward in English rather than having to go through like one of my coworkers who then had to come and ask me and translate back. And then also, I think one thing that was really interesting was getting used to a different level of independence that I've never had here in the US, more kind of in a professional sense, that I was actually able to lead projects of my own. So some days they'd say, okay, like go to the client site and basically like work on your own, find out what they need help on, and just go forward with it, which is very different being a freshman. So since that I had only done 1 year of college, it was kind of surprising to have people who were 40 years older than me looking to me to like solve all of their business problems. But I think a lot of it just has to do with like differences in expertise. So like they knew a lot about the education side of it, and then I was able to help bring the business expertise that they needed. Okay, and then so basically, my research was looking into how different educational programs run more efficiently than other ones, and that was basically to look into, is ATMA doing everything that they can to help NGOs be successful? So one thing that I found really helpful is they do have a set of graduation requirements from their program, where essentially you have to have a strong fundraising capacity, strong first and second line of leadership, and you have to be able to articulate your impact. And all of that is kind of focused around whether or not you're actually going to be able to succeed as like more on the business side again than as an education NGO. So I thought that those graduation requirements were a great place to start when you're looking at how the educational programs run, but I also think that they needed to look a little bit more into clarity of what kind of work they want to do, because a lot of times NGOs would try to solve a lot of problems, and then they couldn't really do anything that they were doing well. So they were just stretching themselves too thin instead of focusing on one problem. And then finally, just some of my takeaways. It was great to be able to get comfortable being uncomfortable in a totally new country and not knowing anyone, and living on my own for close to 3 months. And so professionally, I learned that consulting is definitely something I want to pursue, but would like to have a little bit more like data involved and a little bit more numbers involved. I think it was a little bit too qualitative for what I was interested in, but at the same time, it was a great experience and definitely confirmed what I wanted to do in the future. So, and then academically, it just kind of an understanding of Indian culture that I would never be able to get just from living here in the US. So thank you so much to the CISA team as well as to you, the donor, for making this possible, because I never would have been able to travel there if not for this experience. So thank you.
All right, next up we have Anjali, and she interned with Child Rights in You.
So as Janelle said, I'm Anjali. So a little bit of background information. I'm half Indian and half British. We immigrated to the U.S. after I was 2 years old, and I've grown up in Ann Arbor ever since. I'm a community and global public health major with a minor in medical anthropology. So the organization that I interned with is called Child Rights in You, or CRY for short, and all of their projects serve these 5 main goals. So they're listed here, and they have a really structural, rights-based approach to all of their projects, which is really important in public health that I've learned about. So I was really excited to work with this organization I was in the one that was in Bangalore, but they have several locations all throughout India. So it's a really well-established, well-run organization. So my role at CRY, I was in Bangalore for about half the time of my internship, and the rest of it I was in Chennai and went on various trips throughout India. But the role I was tasked with was documenting the story of another NGO that CRY partners with called SC Studs, which stands for Slum Children Sports Talent and Education Development Society. So that organization asked children to kind of join this soccer team that's all throughout this slum that's in Chennai, and through the trust that's built and the coaching that happens within the teams, the coaches end up encouraging the kids to go back to school. In the slum that was in Chennai that I worked with, about 15 years ago, there was almost no kids in school in that area, and now it's grown to 99% of kids in school. So I was tasked to document this like before and after story and show that if this can be done in this really bad slum in Chennai, then it can be done anywhere. So my research was highly tied to the work I was already tasked to do for CRY. So I asked how community engagement and priorities are incorporated into SC STED's agenda, because community engagement and participation is really important for the viability and sustainability of nonprofits, especially nonprofits. So I wanted a research question that was kind of tied to help the NGO, and like the answers would kind of help them move forward, and something that was related to what I'm studying, so I'm like more informed. So these are some of my research findings highlighted here, but one that I thought was like particularly interesting was that there was a women's empowerment group that was built out of the moms of the kids who were in the soccer teams. So the moms would get together and make candles and sell them, and the money they used for that, they would donate back to SC STEDs or use for their community. So I just thought it was really interesting that, like, although the NGO was targeted towards kids, it really had an impact on the entire community, which is what should be happening in a sustainable and viable NGO. So it was really cool to like actually see successful programs happening in more than one place, in Bangalore and in Chennai. So I was really fortunate to do that. So in terms of academic impact, as I said, I'm community and global public health major, so this was super relevant to what I was doing. I got to go to a whole other country, and then I focused in really on one community for almost the entire time. So I really enjoyed getting both aspects of that, and also applying what I've learned in class to real life work and vice versa now that I've come home. So that was really interesting for me. For professional impact, as Janelle said earlier, like the whole application process was a journey in itself. We had to do like a project expense sheet and outline our entire like trip there, which is program planning and budget planning is a huge part of public health. So I kind of got to practice skills that I potentially will do. And working in non-governmental organizations is also a very common profession for public health. So I was able to do both things and do it in a foreign context and see kind of what I liked and didn't like about how things were run, which will inform my future career path, hopefully. For personal impact, I was way out of my comfort zone for a lot of it. I mean, I called Janelle crying like the first week, like, what have I done? Why am I here? It was like crazy to be alone for so long and to kind of figure everything out for myself. So that was like a really good and empowering experience and like really transformative. I was able, as I said, I'm half Indian, but I haven't been back to India in almost 15 years. So it was really exciting to go see like some of my family on weekend trips. I got to meet like little baby cousins who I had never seen before. And I made some really good friends who I also was able to travel with throughout the time I was there. So thank you to my family for helping me plan like the entire thing, and for Janelle for helping me before and after and during my time in India, and Ariana, Morgan, and Neil for helping me with my application, and of course Dave for making it all possible. It wouldn't have been possible without you. Thank you.
Hi. I'd like to welcome Sophia Sayed, who worked at Samaran, and yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Sophia. I'm a senior here studying economics and minoring in women's studies, and one of my central goals in embarking on a career sooner than I would like to as a senior is to combine that feminist perspective in analyzing law and policy, economic policy. And that was something that I got to do in India. But before I get to that, I wanted to share a little bit about where I was. I was in Dehradun, which is the capital of Uttarakhand, which is that pink state up in the north. And these are just some of the major tourist attractions in Dehradun. Some of the things Dehradun is known for: natural beauty, a pretty strong environmental influence. They have a whole museum dedicated to forest ecology, which is pretty cool. And being in the north, there's also a strong Tibetan influence in the culture. And so that's a picture that I took at the Buddha temple there. I worked at Samalan NGO, which is a rape crisis center that rescues women in dangerous situations. They also conduct counseling sessions for local women in the area, and most importantly, they run a 24/7 helpline so that any woman anywhere in the country in a dangerous situation can call Samalan. Someone will be on the other end of that call, help them navigate the situation, and extricate them from that situation if necessary. These are some pictures at Samadan, the inside and the outside. Just to touch on my role there a little bit, I mostly helped them with their gender advocacy work. I got to do research related to how the state of Uttarakhand and the state of India is addressing gender equality, and that involved visiting courthouses, gender commissions, police stations. And then I also got to work with people in Dehradun. The interns and I would put on street plays just in like the local park on the subject of misogyny. And so people could come and watch these. The point being to kind of expose how these little microaggressions related to gender operate on the same spectrum as the really tragic cases that we dealt with in the NGO. And then my research was actually born out of work that I started here in an economics class related to the Mexico City policy, which essentially limits American foreign aid to NGOs abroad who promote, provide, and refer abortion services. And my question was whether or not this limited women's access abroad to contraception. And so here at Michigan, I was using data from sub-Saharan Africa, running statistical analyses. But since I was going to India, I thought, why don't I actually talk to people, healthcare providers, reproductive health NGOs, corporate social responsibility departments for corporations there, and see how that's actually affected their everyday work. And so one thing that I got to do was accompany a mobile health clinic to a village where they get in this van and they bring contraception and vaccines, vitamins, and they do family planning, counseling, general checkups, and so that was a really cool experience. Which that mostly touches on how this experience impacted me academically. It was really neat to be able to use both my economics knowledge and my interest in feminism and women's studies. I also randomly ran into the Monetary Museum, so I went there. Professionally, I've taken a few human rights classes here at Michigan. And one of the biggest lessons that they stress is that while taking classes is great, there's only so much that you can learn in a classroom with human rights. And it's absolutely imperative that you actually understand what conditions are like on the ground, and that human rights advocacy is coming from communities directed by communities. And so that was not something I had the chance to do here in Ann Arbor. But in India, the lessons I learned from healthcare providers, legal advocates, and just people in the community who wanted to make their cities better places to live could not be replicated anywhere else. And then personally, this experience just took me out of my comfort zone in ways that I had never been before. A really fun example of that is that I went camping for the first time in my life in India. Julie and I climbed a mountain, so that was pretty cool. I also am Indian. Both my parents are Indian immigrants. And so this was an opportunity for me to connect with my heritage. My maternal grandmother, grew up in Calcutta, but she went to boarding school in Missouri. And what I didn't realize before going to India was that Missouri is literally right next to Dehradun. So I got to go to the city where she went to school. I got to go to her school, connect with the alumni department, and go through the yearbooks and find her. And so she's the one right in the center, Pratima Basu. So that was just a really cool way for me to connect with my heritage very concretely. So hopefully I've impressed upon you how much this experience affected me personally, academically, and professionally. While I was only in India for a month, the amount that I learned about myself, about the world, and about my place in the world will last me a lifetime. So thank you so much to Janelle, to Ariana, and to Dave, because this was, again, such an incredible experience.
Okay, so next up we have Madeline Steiger, and she will talk about her internship with, Antara Foundation.
Hi, so a little bit about me. My name is Madeline, and I am a senior. I'm studying biomolecular science and sociology. The intent is eventually to go on to medical school. And so I mentioned that I'm from Alpena, Michigan. That is rural northern Michigan, for those of you who may not be aware. And the fact that I'm from a rural area had a really big factor on me choosing to visit rural India. So I spent my 7 weeks with the Antara Foundation in Jalawar, Rajasthan. So Jalawar is a rural block on like the southwestern edge of Rajasthan. And what I was doing with the Antara Foundation is working towards their mission of improving maternal and child health services that are offered in the entire state of Rajasthan, I guess. And the central focus of this mission is to improve upon the care that people receive within the first 1,000 days of life. So the first 1,000 days of life represent the time period from when a child is first conceived into their second birthday. There's a lot of really critical milestones that happen within this time period, and by improving the care that women and children receive during this 1,000 days, there's a really big impact that can be made in terms of improving maternal and infant mortality rates. So what I did for the Antara Foundation was write case studies, and for these case studies we got to do field visits where we would go into different villages in blocks and kind of meet the frontline workers, which are the nurses, like social health activists, and Anganwadi workers who are providing the healthcare services to the mother and children. So in these field visits, these were definitely like the most, I think, like important moments and days of my entire time in India. And as we were meeting these people, something I noticed was that the monsoon season that was taking place while I was there from July to August was like really impactful to their day-to-day life. So I included a couple pictures. The bottom left is from like my very first week in Jalawar, and we were in this like cement building on the side, and we had to wade through what was probably like almost a foot of water to get into this building. And inside the building, women like the two pictured here were in there with their children to get vaccines and to be at what was like a village health and nutrition day. And like you can see how long their dresses are, you can see that they're waiting with their children, and it was like, I can't believe they navigated this like huge puddle of water, and like it wasn't just outside the building, it was everywhere, to get to these health services. So the monsoon season and its impact on the women and children's ability to access care, as well as the frontline workers' ability to like do their household visits to deliver the care, ended up being the central focus of my research. So what I did is I surveyed the frontline workers about how the monsoon season impacted their ability to deliver care. And I interviewed ASHAs and A&Ms. So ASHAs are the accredited social health activists that counsel women and children on things imperative to like having a healthy pregnancy, having like a healthy nursing period, and also kind of encouraging the women and children to like go visit the A&M, who is the auxiliary nurse midwife. So what both of them said was that they weren't able to make as many household visits during the monsoon season as they typically could outside of it. And they also found that they had less beneficiaries visit their village health and nutrition days during the monsoon season. As for the auxiliary nurse midwife, something I asked them about as well too is if they noticed an increase in waterborne illnesses during the monsoon season. So essentially when there is these big floods and there's all this water, waste and also like other bacteria and parasites can like be spread more easily. So like I got sick twice there, and a lot of the people I noticed, like whenever I told them, they were like, oh yeah, it's probably the monsoon season. So that was interesting to see how not only was it like impeding people's access to care, but it was also like kind of contributing to maybe how often they were getting sick. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is with these services and with the surveys that I gave, there was like a little bit of copying between the A&Ms and the ASHAs. Like they all would submit the same answers. So I talked to kind of my supervisors about it, and I guess there's a lot of pressure whenever they get like tested. There's like benchmarks they have to make, and there's a lot of there's I guess a lot of pressure for them to perform to the extent that they think they have to. So that was really interesting to see, because I thought that I made it very clear with my surveys that like this was really low risk. Like I just wanted to know like what their day-to-day work was. But that was something I thought was interesting and that I would mention. So in terms of personal impact, what these 7 weeks had, really hard to articulate. I did a lot of writing while I was there, for the blog, for the case studies, and then also journaling personally, and then the report as well. And I'm not a very comfortable writer, so it was like really difficult, but I've definitely seen growth in that. So that was really nice to develop. My communication skills improved, and I think a lot of that was when you're working with people who don't predominantly speak English, like as their first language. There's a lot of like awkwardness, and you kind of got to pick up on more subtle forms of communication, like body language, facial expressions, tones. So that was really nice to develop. Definitely confidence, as a lot of you have already said. Like traveling alone and working with an NGO in India by myself was like huge. So the fact that like that worked out was wonderful. You know, I feel really great. Yeah, like I'm just like, I don't know. I didn't want to think, yeah. So definitely confidence. And then self-awareness. You spend a lot of time alone while you're there. You're away from your family. The time zones are off. So I spent a lot of time thinking and then like what my impact for my NGO was, as well as like what their impact on me is. And in the same sense, like, I guess self-awareness in terms of where I am globally, that's something I've thought a lot about, is like the privilege we have here in the US, and how we can kind of use this to give back. Nice transition into social responsibility. Definitely left with a really strong sense of urgency to act and kind of give back to others. And then finally sharing. I don't know if you've noticed this, but something I was really struck by was like the generosity and the culture of like giving and sharing in India. All of the fellows that worked at my NGO and all of my coworkers were so eager to share and to give, and I really wanted to work on bringing that back with me. So something I've been trying to do is like share with my friends at home like what I got out of India and like what I learned. So like the pictures I included like look like they're really tiny details, but I think that's how I've been able to share with people what I had in India, is like through the tiny details. Last but not least, thank you so much to everyone who made this possible. It's a beautiful experience, so thank you.
All right, next up we have Julia Stewart, and she did her internship with the Foundation for Ecological Security.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia, and I interned in Rajasthan in Udaipur this summer. So a little bit about me. I am now a sophomore student at the University of Michigan. I'm studying mechanical engineering, and I love nature and the outdoors a lot, so I really want to have an impact on the environment after I graduate and go on with my engineering degree. And so I wanted to explore how I could apply that through my internship in India this past summer. Here's a little bit about what I did. This is the office that I worked at. I would ride my bicycle to work through the streets of India every day and arrive here and park it up on the ramp. And this is the beautiful city that I was living in, so I had this lovely scenery around me every day as well. And while I was at this office, in the beginning I was mostly doing a lot of background research on what the organization does, how they do it. We talked a lot with my coworkers. It was amazing to get to build these relationships with the people I was working with and learn not only about their culture, their day-to-day, but also sort of what they thought of interacting with me. That was really interesting. And I did a lot of field visits while I was there as well. So to give a little background about the Foundation for Ecological Security, they do a lot of environmental interventions to try and improve the ecology of degraded rural villages around India. So I was working in their Rajasthan location, and this is a picture of the Aravalli Hills, which are a very huge mountain range in Rajasthan. So you can see a lot of their interventions with these loose boulder structures, contour trenches, and how hilly but also how deserted and degraded the area is. So a lot of the work is to try and improve water collection into the soil and stop it from running just over the soil and try and get it down into the soil. So I learned a lot about this while I was there and actually seeing these things firsthand, which was incredible. Here you can see some of the interventions a little more closely. You can also kind of see like how high up we are. There's like a little person up there in the upper right-hand corner. And these are some of the contour trenches that I was talking about. So they dig long holes into the ground so that the water will flow down. This is actually the way that they excavate to try and create a water harvesting structure. So they dig little rectangular holes and then knock down those walls to make really big rectangular holes. And also, there are people just living everywhere in these villages, and the water harvesting structures that we're creating, they get their water from, they use to irrigate their crops and their farmland. And so seeing how their lives are impacted on the day-to-day by the interventions that this NGO was putting up and that I was able to contribute to a bit as well was really impactful. And animals obviously inhabit the area as well, which is pretty cool. I made some friends. This was one day where I was going for a field visit to try and meet and interact with some of the villagers, and my one English-speaking contact person just drove off on the back of a bike with another person from the village, and I was left in the car with a goat on the wall and not sure what was going on for the rest of the day. And that was something I just had to learn to deal with, and that was kind of just the experience and realizing that it's okay and I'll be fine at the end of the day and I'll learn from this it really helped me grow a lot. And then sometimes it was just not a lot to do. I kind of had to figure out, you know, like, what am I doing with myself? What do I want my project to go in the direction of? When I was FaceTiming at like 1 a.m. with the coworkers there, they gave me this project description. They're like, we think you would really fit in well with our diversion-based irrigation project. And then I get there and they're like, okay, so tell us what you're gonna do. And so this was me trying to figure out what I was gonna do in the 105-degree heat with no air conditioning, and after probably a very big lunch of chapati, which didn't sit well with me. But so, you know, the frustration that Dave had mentioned was definitely there, but so was the fascination. This was an elephant that I saw on my ride home from work one day that was just chilling in the street. And it kind of just inspired me to really get going and get my stuff together, find my own motivation that my foundation didn't necessarily give to me, and bring myself together and develop my project and my research to really explore the diversion-based irrigation further. So I had to sort of make my own agenda, make my own field visits. I came and interacted with the people in the Barawali village, and they showed me this map that they had created themselves. The foundation really encourages the work of the villagers themselves in implementing their own interventions. And so they had drawn up this map, and through a translator, I was able to understand what they were talking about and how it had this diversion-based irrigation system, which is a gravity flow system, and they just use basic PVC piping to try and get water from that water harvesting structure down to the farmland. And it was really awesome to be able to do that, and I was able to do a full assessment by talking to people, by investigating the actual structures. So this was another structure with a lot of animals. That was really cool. And so this is sort of like the canals that they have before they do the intervention, which is not nearly as effective, especially in the summer season. So in the end, the work I was able to do and the relationships I was able to build was fantastic. But it impacted me more than that. It impacted me socially by giving me a way of just figuring out how I'm going to interact with people that I have no idea what their culture is like and how they interact on like a day-to-day basis, which I realize is very similar to the way I do. So it was awesome. I made a lot of friends. I practiced yoga. I had an amazing host family that supported me incredibly and truly loved me and reminded me every day that a guest is like God, and I'm going to continue to incorporate that in my life when I have guests myself. I also met some fellow researchers who were doing Fulbright research, which was really cool, and we'd get coffee sometimes. And then academically, I pulled this report together myself without having any instruction or direction, really. I had to generate that all from within, and I'm very proud of what I was able to pull off. And this is my host family again, so just, you know, the personal impact was incredible. I still keep in touch with them, and they wished me a happy birthday the other day, which was lovely. And I navigated the world. I pulled together planes and trains and buses and saw amazing, incredible things and did it on my own with the help of Ariana, Janelle, and Morgan, and especially Dave. Thank you so much for your contribution to this because it has really shaped who I am today, 100%. So thank you.
And next up is Maddie Walsh, and she interned with the Sanctum Birthing Center.
Hi, like Janelle said, I'm Maddie, and I was in Hyderabad, India for 5 weeks this summer, working at the Sanctum Natural Birth Center. Before I go too far, I do want to say that some of the pictures on here are of patients and stuff at the birthing center, but they had consents and stuff signed before, and the center uses it for marketing. So. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a senior in the School of Nursing right now at Michigan, so I spend a lot of time in that building right there. And I'm really interested in maternal and child health and have been for a while. I worked for the Detroit Health Department in the maternal child health branch the summer after my freshman year. And after that, went to Ghana the summer after my sophomore year to work on making contraception more accessible to women in more rural areas of Ghana. And then prior to going to India, I worked at Cleveland Clinic and was on the labor and delivery unit there until I moved to India for 5 weeks. And then before I was leaving, one of the things that was really important to me going into this that I wanted to figure out is if I wanted to pursue a midwifery degree or a medical degree. And this really helped me figure that out. So I'll go into a little bit. So this is just a picture of the birthing center. This is one of the Lamaze classes that I was in. So how does the Sanctum Natural Birth Center work? Basically, it has a really incredibly unique model of care called a collaborative model of care. So it's led by autonomous midwives with the backup of OBGYNs, anesthesiologists, and pediatricians who are on call 24/7. So in addition, the center also provides wraparound care. So they have diet counseling and yoga and Lamaze classes also available for moms. So Dr. Vijaya is the midwife who runs it, and her husband opened the birth center because they wanted to empower women and their families to ensure more positive birth experiences for women in India. So this is kind of the why. Right now in the state in which Sanctum is located, the cesarean section rates in the private and public hospitals are 75% and 58% respectively. So at Sanctum, women are empowered to take charge of their own health and care, and the cesarean rate is 10% there. This shows a little bit. Also at Sanctum, families are all welcome in the prenatal appointments and all through labor and delivery, which is not always an option in a lot of the hospitals. Women are often alone, which is really difficult. So this is the main hallway at the birthing center that I spent a lot of long nights walking with moms through and squatting and lunging and all that stuff to help them progress through labor. And just for a little bit of context, just outside these doors are stairs, and in the building there's also a Samsung office and a restaurant and 2 bars in the same building. And so the restaurant actually provided the meals for all the families while they were going through labor and delivery. So it was really spicy, but very good. And then the bars would play really loud music at night on the weekend, so sometimes we'd be taking the stairs to kind of help labor progress, and we'd have like young 20-something guys just trying to go to the bar, and they would be very alarmed at a woman in active labor going up and down the stairs. So, okay, so this is one of the rooms. They really try to make the rooms kind of like a home or a bedroom and stuff. And as you can see, there's like a little bed underneath the big bed that we would pull out, and we'd often have grandmothers and in-laws and everyone in the room hanging out, which was a really cool way to see that the families come together and everyone got to be a part of the labor and delivery experience. Okay, so while I was there at Sanctum, I kind of acted as a nursing student / doula intern. So I was able to support women through early labor, and then once things progressed a little bit, a nurse and a midwife would come in and help me. In addition to that, I also got to shadow in outpatient appointments, Lamaze classes and aerobics classes to kind of see the wraparound care that was provided for these women and the impact that it had. In addition, I organized the paper charts into an Excel spreadsheet for the entire year of 2017. So there were 139 births during that time. So it was cool for me to go through all the charts and kind of see how that worked. And also we organized it so that they can use the research or use the data for more research later. And then finally, I was able to create some PowerPoint presentations that Dr. Vijaya is going to use at the 2018 Midwifery Today conference. So that was really cool to get to help her with that. So this is just a picture of one of the moms that we were supporting. So as you can see here, the midwives at the center really are really good about getting women up and moving and stuff and in different positions to help labor progress. So it was cool for me to learn about that. All right. So then also during my time in India, I was able to conduct research like all of us did. Early on in my time there, I began reading a book that Dr. Vijaya mentioned to me that I should read. And it kind of talked about 9 to 5 births and how in the US, a lot of times medical interventions are changing the timing of births, right? And so as you can see here in the US, in 2004, during the week, about 12,000 babies would be born during the day. And then on the weekends, it was 8,000. So there's really a dramatic difference in kind of the impact that our medical interventions were having on the timing of births. So although these interventions can be super necessary and life-saving at times, doing it without like a medical indication, doing these interventions without a medical indication can be harmful to the mom and the baby. So I looked at Sanctum's data to see what happened with the timing of births when there weren't any medical any medical interventions, and we found that during a 2-month period, only 18% of the babies were born between the hours of 9 to 5. So like everyone mentioned, I learned so much during my time in India. I did decide that I want to pursue a degree in medicine. So right now I'm applying to post-bac so that I can apply to medical school, which is exciting. I learned that I want to be able to handle emergency situations in obstetrics, which do happen a fair amount. And then right now I'm also working on setting up a partnership between the School of Nursing and the Birth Center, so that midwifery students and faculty can go learn about autonomous midwifery care, and Dr. Vijaya can get some sleep, finally. I also learned a lot about the importance of people and presence. I really relied a lot on the kindness of strangers while I was in India, and I got to see women, the strength that they drew from the people that were with them during the labor process, which was really amazing. All right, in sum, I really could not imagine a more transformative way to spend my summer, so thank you so much for this opportunity and for everyone who made it possible.
So we've heard from all of the fellows, so we should give them a round of applause. That was awesome. I know. And we'll be having a reception right out in the hall following this event, but we'd like to close with some words from Dave. So thank you again all for being here, and I'll turn it over.
Wow. In 2005, when I was thinking of this program, I never imagined it'd be like this. Every year I thought, can't top this. You know, the fellows who've gone to India, you know, they've had a diversity of projects. They've navigated a, you know, challenging part of the world. They've come back with new perspectives, new confidence, and you know, I think you 10 have been the top. Of course, I say that every year, but I do mean it, and I think it's something where, as I mentioned earlier, this is the highlight of my year. My wife did not come with me, as she hasn't in the past, but I share with her what I have experienced vicariously through the fellows. And I had a chance to read your letters of appreciation, and that also is something that I treasure. And I let my wife read them, and she says, "Oh, they really had a good time. They really learned a lot. I bet you're glad that you did what you did, you know, for funding it." And I said, "No, sort of." One of the things that I hope you take away from the experience you've had in India is that having gone to a country so different from the United States, halfway around the world, go there with obviously issues you encountered, especially initially, but you overcame those. And so my feeling is no matter where life's journey leads you, you will be successful. You have demonstrated the capability of independent thinking, independent work, and I can't imagine any issue that will come up in your lives that will be more challenging than this. And I think the fact that you have accomplished it shows, sky's the limit. The other thing that I would like to leave you with as you continue life's journey, at some point in time, you may have an opportunity to provide financial support to an organization that really resonates with you. And I would encourage you to think long and hard when that opportunity comes and do something that will make the world maybe a little bit better than what you left it. And if you think you got a terrific education at University of Michigan, think about something here that you might want to support. And if you do, I think you'll have the same pleasure that I have had in seeing the fruition of what a monetary donation can accomplish. I'd also like to re-thank the faculty and staff. Janelle, I'm glad that you have decided that you're not going to leave and that you're going to stay on for another 10 years. I appreciate what you've done. I appreciate that you have basically, I think, juggled two things at the same time, and the fact that you continued with the program through today's presentation. Thank you. I'd also like to thank you fellows. You have made the program what it is, and I hope, and I think you are, sharing your experiences with your friends and family, and I think it was an opportunity which I'm glad you seized, and I hope you're glad that you seized it. Thank you.